Who wants to learn about how Michel Foucault was a pedophile? That is a fact. Michel Foucault was not just a pedophile, but a sex tourist pedophile. Oh, he didn't just advocate for it, he did it. Now, there's a lot of elements here. Like, I've cited Foucault a few times in my videos, and I'm fine with that. You know, what he wrote doesn't really have anything at all to do with being a pedophile. But there's some people who are very much attached to the image of, like, these figures, and they, like, turn them into, like, something larger than life, and they get extremely offended if you just basically talk about what are indisputable historical truths about them, which are justified by the evidence. So let's talk about how and why Michel Foucault was a pedophile. First, there was this conservative moron from France named Guy Storman, and no one has any fucking clue who he is, really. But he levied an accusation in the French press, like a kind of offhanded comment, where he said that Foucault would, like, buy sex from, like, 8-year-olds and, like, rape them in a graveyard. And if that sounds fantastical to you, it's because it was. It's obviously bullshit. Some parts of, like, the press went with that story just based on that guy claiming that he definitely saw that happen. But the part that I'm interested in here is what happened after that. And I think it says a whole lot about France, about the incredibly low standards that people have to forgive figures who they admire, who obviously did awful, unforgivable shit. So right after that came to light, this French newspaper or whatever, Jeune Afrique, I'm not going to pronounce French words correctly, that's beyond me. They sent, like, their local correspondent in Tunisia out to the town where Foucault supposedly did pedophilia. Now, if you don't know, Foucault was in Tunisia, I believe, for 2 years, from, like, 1966 to 1967, teaching at a university there and stuff. And he apparently was doing sex tourism there while he was there. Now, you know, it's one thing to fuck teenagers in your own country. It's even worse to fuck teenagers in a country that was colonized by your country about a decade earlier. You know, that's a whole nother level of scum. And that's what he did. So I just want to know, this is in French. I'm going to translate it into English. But the title here in French, which I think is pretty readable even if you don't speak French, is Michel Foucault was not a pedophile. Rather, he was seduced by young ephebes. So apparently, in France, the it's not pedophilia, it's ephebophilia defense actually works, because they led with this title as if it was, like, some sort of, like, exonerating thing. Like, yeah, he wasn't a pedophile, he was seduced by young ephebes. And apparently in France, this counts as a defense. So let's actually look at the substance of the article. Did the French philosopher engage in pedophile acts during his time in Tunisia? This is what the essayist Guy Storman reports. Jeune Afrique interviewed witnesses at the time. Here's Storman's original claim. There were children of 8, 9, 10 chasing after him. He would throw money at them, telling them, meet at 10 p.m. at the usual place. And then apparently he raped them on graves. Obviously, that's completely untrue. But there is substance to that claim. Now, I think it's pretty clear that Storman heard something about what he did there and just, like, completely exaggerated it to an absurd degree. But Foucault was a pedophile. And here's why. So they asked witnesses in the village, and the most significant testimony came from a guy whose name I cannot pronounce, Monsef Ben Aves, who is described as the true memory of the village. Now, from what I understand, that he's like a sort of village historian who sort of aggregates testimonies and witness accounts from other people who live in the village to form, like, you know, so he's sort of like an aggregation of other witness accounts. And, you know, I'd say that what he says here is probably pretty authoritative based on that, especially because the villagers here are mostly trying to defend Foucault. And this guy also seems to be trying to defend Foucault. What was his defense of Foucault? Foucault was not a pedophile. He was seduced by the young ephebes, guys aged 17 or 18, whom he briefly found in the thickets under the lighthouse next to the cemetery. Quite clearly there, the guy tries to defend Foucault by saying, oh no, he wasn't a pedophile, he was an ephebophile. He actually did sex tourism to Tunisia and had sex with 17-year-olds, okay? Not 10-year-olds, 17-year-olds. It's not pedophilia, it's ephebophilia. So apparently in France, this passes for a defense. Not for me, though. And I imagine not for any sane people, okay? Michel Foucault went to Tunisia and apparently paid 17-year-old boys for sex. That is underage sex tourism, the sort of thing that would disqualify anyone today out of basically being a human being. Underage sex tourism in your country's former colony. It's the next level of scumdom, okay? Now, Foucault's defenders like to say that the claims against him were retracted, and I mean, that is true, in a way. Guy Sorman did retract his initial claim after seeing this, but the guy in this article, the true memory of the village, Monsef Benavis, did not retract anything, because he doesn't need to, because in France it's acceptable to rape 17-year-olds in a colonized country, apparently. But regardless of the standards in France, which are obviously very low, Foucault is obviously a pedophile. He raped 17-year-old colonized kids. It's that simple. He was a sex tourist. Now, how did people get the idea that there was nothing wrong here? Well, they read this article, which defends Foucault, using this source. So this article basically defends Foucault against Sorman's accusations by citing that same article, right? And it's been like diffused by people who are trying to defend Foucault from the charge of pedophilia. Even in this article, it says that, he actually had sex with 17 or 18-year-olds, which, that should ring alarm bells for you by itself. That the defense is basically, he's not a pedophile, he's an ephebophile. And they also cite Monsef Benavis. But in this article, they don't include the actual words that were used. They use the word boys. In the article that we just cited, the word used was ephebe. There's no ephebe here. The word seduced, which clearly makes it clear that he had sex with these kids, is not included in this article at all. So we have a clear example of people manipulating those who are too stupid or too lazy to just go on Google Translate the original French article to see that it's bullshit, and also relying on the fact that they're all also so morally bankrupt that they're just going to see that he fucked 17-year-olds and not see any issue with it, which apparently worked. Yeah, Sorman was bullshitting, but his bullshit was an exaggeration of a truth, which is that Foucault clearly raped, because it's rape, you cannot have consensual sex with a fucking 17-year-old kid when you're like 40. He clearly raped 17-year-old colonized kids while doing sex tourism in a former French colony as a Frenchman. That's pedophilia, it's pedophilic sex tourism, no matter what way you look at it. Now, I'm not saying this because I think we need to discount everything that Foucault said. I don't believe that he was a postmodern neo-Marxist. I found a lot of use in a lot of his theory. But please don't fucking idolize these people. Please don't feel the need to defend every little thing they say because you have some sort of personal investment in them being like morally good people, rather than like a non-personal investment in their work. So yeah, Michel Foucault was a pedophile. The evidence is clear. I think like someone described as like essentially the village historian who's also trying to defend him in saying that he fucked 17-year-old boys is more than good enough of a source to conclude that Michel Foucault did indeed fuck 17-year-old colonized kids in Tunisia, especially in light of the fact that Foucault explicitly argued multiple times that children were able to give consent to sex, which I will go over too, just to be clear. The direct quote from Foucault is, "The idea that a child is incapable of explaining what happened and was incapable of giving his consent are two abuses that are quite intolerable, quite unacceptable." Okay? So we have someone who was openly against criminalizing pedophilia, who openly believed that children could consent to sex, who went to Tunisia, had sex with 17-year-old boys, ephebes, next to a graveyard under the moonlight. Unambiguous pedophilic sex tourism, okay? Enjoy Foucault's work all you want, but don't try and tell me that he wasn't a pedophile. The evidence is fucking clear that he was. Regardless of how Guy Sorman, the initial accuser, retracted his initial claims, the claim of him fucking 17-year-old Tunisian kids is pretty much incontestably true. It's never been retracted. And honestly, the people who made that claim and the people and a lot of people in France defending Foucault don't seem to think it needs to be retracted because they seem to think that ephebophilia is okay, which is fucked up on its own and says a whole lot about France, that that's a valid defense. But for us normal people who aren't disgusting Frenchmen, it's clear that he was a pedophile. Open and shut case. If you don't like it, don't shoot the messenger. It's not on me for telling you about it. So yeah, if you want to like try to frame it, like the first claim being retracted somehow changes everything here, and any other claim is also false. That's obviously not true. The second claim, the more grounded in reality one of him fucking 17-year-old boys in Tunisia is obviously true, regardless of how much Guy Sorman originally exaggerated the story and got the details wrong. It's up for you to grasp with that. It's not up to me. If you can't deal with it, if you want to lie about the substance of it, it's your fault for idolizing like intellectual figures so much that you feel the need to defend their honor. Anyway, France is fucking weird. That's the moral of the story here, basically.